that was totally unthinkable. I was total beginner. I had no clue. I thought this is impossible for me. This is impossible. So if you can learn something like that, do something like that absolutely excites you, that you wake up and like my kids, they have the sparkling eyes, and you wake up and you want to go for it. That's the skill I challenge you to learn.
Welcome back to the Own Your Awkward podcast. I'm your host, Andy Vargo, and every episode we get into what has made our guests vulnerable and how they've learned how to own their awkward in order to live their best life. Stay tuned so you can hear every awkward moment in today's show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Own Your Awkward podcast. Today, I have a guest from all the way around the world, at least from where I'm sitting, Marcel Kuhn from Switzerland. Marcel, how are you today?
I'm feeling fantastic. I'm so happy to be here, Andy. Let's do this.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you for making the time to do it. It's always tricky when we're in time zones that are so far away. We've got to, my morning, your evening works out well. So glad to have you on. So, Marcel, before we dive into hearing about your awkward, we're going to do that in a minute because everybody wants to know that. I'm kind of curious, what's the most exciting thing you have going on right now?
Right now, I'm just working on a course that makes the book that I wrote and published this year more applicable to the day-to-day life. So this course should be coming out soon. I don't know how long it takes. It always takes longer than you plan. And it's called Quantum Jump to Unthinkable Living in 21 Days. So it's a course that helps you to do the unthinkable life, unthinkable living in 21 days.
I love that. I can't wait to check into that. We're going to hear more about your book in a couple minutes. You guys heard the hint there about unthinkable. Marcel challenges us to get into that unthinkable thing. And I when you asked me what my unthinkable was, I was like, gosh, it's kind of like me putting you on the spot with your awkward. It's like, I don't know if I've thought about it like that. So Marcel, we got to know, what's that awkward thing you've had to own in order to live your best life?
I just realized that I don't develop such a nice mustache like you. I tried many times. And yeah, I just don't have a lot of facial hair. So yeah, I don't grow a really nice mustache.
Right. And is that
so,
something
sorry,
that bothered you?
That's just an example of my awkward sense of humor.
I love it.
So I speak irony, I speak it fluently. Next to my mother tongue of German, Swiss German, and other languages that I speak. But I think that's kind of something to hide my awkward self.
Okay.
So the kind of this a dry sense of humor that I got from my dad, I guess. And so I always felt as a young child in school, I always felt a little awkward. So I'm totally fine. I just didn't feel like I belong. I was always feeling a little bit different than the other people. So I developed a sense of humor that many people don't understand. And now I'm a father of 3 boys, and they not always appreciate my sense of humor. But when I try to be serious, they prefer my sense of humor.
Oh, yeah, funny how that works.
What's that?
It's funny how that works, that they don't appreciate your sense of humor until you lean into the serious.
Yeah, but they say when I try to be serious, I'm actually even more funny. So I'm not sure, but I just realized. So the sense of humor was something to try to be part of the group, or
right.
And so that's probably my awkward. Yeah.
So do you remember when you first started? You said early on you were using it because you didn't feel like you fit in. Do you remember when you first started using humor like that?
Yeah, I think it was really early on. Like thinking back, probably around 6 years old.
Oh wow, really young.
Yeah, I liked, at that time I liked to perform. I was like, the family. I like to perform and play, make plays and like theater. Yeah, so I like to do that. I like to play theater and tell stories. I've always been a storyteller. So that's what I, at that time, in my youth, I didn't feel that what I my capabilities didn't. I felt like they didn't do anything. I was a dreamer, a storyteller, and I felt like it was not a skill that was of value, from my perspective.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really valuable thing to look back on and see that it was just from your perspective, because when we step into situations, we don't always see the value that we're bringing with our skill set or our talents, or even the way that we're viewing something. And so it's easy to not see it as valuable. And yet other people might really need that entertainment. They might really need to hear the dreams that you're seeing, because they might be kind of stuck and not knowing where to go, even if they're really talented in something that you appreciate.
Yeah. So that's a good summary of what I just talked about. I feel I was never part of a group because I felt too limited by the group. So I always wanted to be outside of the box, which on one side I was sad not to be part of the group, not to be in the uniform, and not to play soccer and not to do that. But this gives you a lot of freedom,
Right.
and which is really great for creativity. You need your space and you need your freedom and not be boxed in to be able to create and innovate. And I think what it turned out is now publishing a book is really about storytelling and talking, having different conversations and interviews. So what I felt was awkward is actually my superpower nowadays.
I love that. That's why we're here, because I think more often than not, that's true, and people don't really know it until later in life.
Yeah. And also being not part of the group is right. In hindsight, I see that the reason why, because I wanted to be my own master, my own boss, and wanted to decide for myself. And I think now I see my kids they're in school now, and the school system so much wants the kids to be part of the system. Mm-hmm. And they are so much pushed into the system, and so everyone has to work like a well working machine, right? And so this means less liberty, less freedom. And I try to balance that with exploring, creating space and creating empty space for my kids to explore outside of the system, outside of their sports, their hobbies, that there is some empty space to explore different areas.
Yeah, I think that's really valuable that you're passing it on to your children, because you may have felt a certain way when you were growing up and learned how to cope and create and put this humor in there as a barrier, yet now you can be purposeful in the lessons you give your kids.
Yeah, now it sounds maybe like it's a whole process behind it, but it's more following the feeling. The feeling of feeling stuck when there are too many rules. And I'm you hear it from my accent, so I'm Swiss, right? So I'm from the German part of Switzerland, and Switzerland, it's quite structured and there are many rules, like from the Germanic side and the Swiss side. It's very structured and many rules, so it's sometimes hard to break out. And I just want to give these opportunities to my kids as much as I can.
Right. Now, when you started using humor that long ago, and you said yours was kind of a dry humor, so it was a little different, how did it feel the first few times, if you can remember, when you noticed that you were using it? How did that feel for you?
I think I copied my dad, who has a dry sense of humor. And I think many times you're not understood when you use a dry sense of humor. yeah, but for me, I do a lot of word plays, and yeah, so yeah, I guess you get a kind of practice, and then it just becomes your personality. So you don't think about it anymore. When you do things over and over, it becomes your personality, and then it's just becomes a character trait, I think.
Right. Now, how has that served you as you've moved into life with all the things you've done? You're doing a lot of different stuff. Like, one of the things that people might notice, if you're listening, you won't see this, but Marcel is in front of a beautiful wave scene in his background, which does not look like it's in Switzerland. What is that all about?
Yeah, so when I was 18, I had the opportunity to be a foreign exchange student in California. And I had a big dream to learn how to surf, and I actually watched the movie Point Break with Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze.
Yeah.
That was my inspiration to start surfing.
Okay.
And so it's about the gang of bank robbers, right? So I didn't want to rob a bank, but I wanted to surf and skydive. And I had the opportunity to actually get the chance to travel to California, and I was perfectly situated to learn how to surf. So and for me, it was like finding something, like coming home. Even though I've never surfed before, it was like I felt so natural in surfing. And when I came back, I actually told my parents I wouldn't come back, and but they kind of wanted me to come back. And of course, I could have decided otherwise, but then it was just easier to go back. But it always stayed with me, this passion for the water and for to be part of something greater. And when I came back, I actually wrote a thesis paper about philosophy and the culture of surfing. And in that paper, I did interviews with surfers. And now, so many years later, this year, so that was in 97, 98, and now in 23, I published this book, which is actually using the allegory of surfing to explain how to navigate life and how to embrace the unthinkable, how to live the unthinkable and living in flow. So it's kind of full circle back to my youth.
Wow. So you've been sitting on that idea for that long.
Yeah, sitting on it, but not realizing it. So it's many times you talk about awkward. I talk about unthinkable, but I think it's the same kind of topic from a different angle, right? So it's like tomato. It's just a different angle, I think, and right. It's sometimes the things are inside us, but we don't really know, but they are like inside us. Like when you look at the iceberg, you see only 5 or 10% of the iceberg, and there is so much down. And I think that's in our subconscious. And when we are just in the present, it can come out. The environment has to be right for our best self to come forward and to embrace it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, which is similar to what I talked about. Like you said, that like these things are inside of us and we don't always know it. And sometimes it takes someone else to see it for us, to point it out, or something, a life event. And I don't know, have you had things that have made you shift your perspective? Like, you've had this book there, kind of the content's been in your head for a while, but you just did it. Were there things that made you go, oh, it's time, I got to get this word out there?
Yeah, in my case, we had a family tragedy that made me think about about legacy and about life and about mortality. So then I asked myself the question, well, why are some people so successful and fulfilled and other people not? And this seems like so far away from the whole surfing analogy, and it is. So from that question, which was about success and fulfillment, through few events, like I went through separation and divorce, and then this brought me to the using the analogy of surfing for life. So it was kind of a soul searching journey the last 7 years, and especially in the last 3 years with separation, divorce, really sometimes you need outside events to really dig deep, go to your deepest parts.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting how it becomes that soul searching journey, and then you start, at least for myself, start looking at events or lessons you've learned throughout life, and sometimes you say, darn it, that lesson was there 20 years ago. I wish I understood it or saw it or knew it.
Yes, I think Steve Jobs talked about that you only see the connections between the dots in hindsight.
Mm.
And everyone has a perfect CV, and it's only in hindsight you can say, oh, already when I was in school, I wanted to become that. But it's usually the stories we tell afterwards, right? So it makes all sense afterwards.
Right. So what would be, if you were going to look at a lesson that you learned early on, excuse me, early on in life, that you're looking back and connecting the dots now, and maybe this is part of, addressed in your book, but what would be one of the lessons you found for yourself that you'd share with people?
I think a lesson that is really important is connected to surfing, is not to fight against the currents and fight against the waves. And I think for a lot of my life, I tried to paddle against the waves and paddle against the currents, and the waves are always stronger. So I talk about surrender, and surrender is about giving in and not giving up. So that's a big lesson that I mentioned in my book, and that's a lesson that has been taught to me so many times. And my old mindset was always, I tried something difficult, something unthinkable, and then I failed. Then I thought, okay, to compensate that, to make it all okay, to make this failure okay, I have to succeed at something that is 10 times more difficult.
Mm.
And then I failed at that, because when you try really audacious activities, then the chances of failing is pretty high.
Right.
And when you have this mindset that you always have to prove that you are okay and that you are not awkward and that you belong, I wanted to show that I'm successful. So I was chasing success. And that's the opposite of surrender, and that's the opposite of living in flow. And what I'm teaching now is how to live in flow. And I'm not talking about flow state like the pro athletes talk about flow state. I talk about flow consciousness. So to set up the life like the inner, like your inner life and your outer life, set it up in a way that you can live in flow at all times.
Okay.
And that doesn't mean that life is becoming easy. You just, there is always challenges, and you go through them, but you can stay in flow through the challenges.
Yeah. So now that you have these better lessons where you have a better understanding about being in this flow, do you still use your humor the same way as an escape, or how do you use it now?
I still use the dry sense of humor.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm okay with not always being understood. I'm totally okay with that.
Yeah, it does make people have to think a little bit.
Yes, and so sometimes I tell my kids and friends and family, I tell it, you should see how it is inside my brain. There is just not so much seriousness there.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually in my interviews, I had the chance to interview the abbot of a Tibetan monastery in Switzerland.
Oh wow!
And he was trained by His Holiness Dalai Lama. So he's one of the highest trained abbots as a Buddhist monk. He's amazing. He spent his whole life from 13 to now, like 50 years. He spent studying Buddhism, and practicing compassion and meditating. And he told me that the right humor is the one that is to the point. You know, that's the right humor. You know, that there is a point, and that is a lesson. And I really like that. And actually, when you follow Dalai Lama, His Holiness, you will see that he has a lot of great humor. You know.
Yeah. It's
So
interesting
I
you
think
don't think about relating humor to the Dalai Lama, but that is true.
Yeah, so it's really to the point. So there is a message, insight, and to the point. And when I talk about insights, is a real insight is when you learn something, you get an insight, and the trajectory of your life from now on changes. And to be able to grasp or embrace this insight, you have to be ready and you have to be present. So I find that's my hope with my book, that someone reads it and gets one insight, meaning that the rest of his life, her life changes.
Yeah, I want to go back over that point again, because I think that's so important. How did you word that? Once you get an insight, the trajectory of your life has changed?
Yes. A real insight is when the rest of your life from this moment on totally transform and changes. So the trajectory of your life changes. That's a real insight.
Okay. That's looking back, that's so true, because I think about the lessons that I've learned, or the things that have been those insight moments, that once I knew that, I couldn't look at things the same way anymore. And so thus it does change where you're going forward.
And I can share you an example. So when you blow up a balloon, when you put air in a balloon, when you leave the air, when you let the air out, the size of the balloon will never be the same. So it expanded.
Oh, yeah.
So when you get an insight, it's really hard to unlearn that, right? When you have a real insight, your whole being expands, right?
Yeah.
So that's why teaching is so difficult, because you know something, and you have to teach someone that doesn't know it.
Right.
Right.
I love that analogy of the balloon. That's so visual. I can just picture that. Like, I was blowing up a balloon in my head while you were saying that. I was like, okay, what's going to happen? Are we going to pop the balloon? But you're right. It never goes back to the same form.
Yes. So that's why, knowledge is so powerful, right? But insights are connected to emotions, right? So it's not only in the linear mind, but more in the heart, I guess.
Yeah. Now, have you ever had your humor backfire?
No. I'm not sure. It's I just realized it's okay when someone doesn't appreciate my sense of humor. And I think it all has to do with vibrations. And when we it's like speaking a language. When I speak Chinese to you, I assume you don't speak Chinese, right?
Correct.
Just an example. So when I have a sense of humor that someone else doesn't understand, it's like speaking a different language. So there is no harm, if someone doesn't understand.
Interesting. Yeah,
that's okay.
Fair. Yeah, I think sometimes people are too quick to find offense where it really is just a lack of understanding.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, how you mentioned you speak several languages. How many languages do you speak?
So I grew up in Switzerland, and Switzerland is a really small country. We have 4 languages. We have German, French, Italian, and then we have something called Romansh.
Okay.
It's similar to Italian or Latin. I don't speak it, but it's only a very small part of the population who speaks it. But it's one of the 4 official languages of Switzerland.
Okay.
And the German I speak, the Swiss German, is also different from the standard German. Okay. So you have to speak different languages. For me, Swiss German is my mother tongue, and then in school I speak standard German, but that feels really uncomfortable for me. So I'm not really eloquent in that. Sure. I don't sound great. And then in school I studied French and Spanish and English, and I lived in Japan for 4 years. So I learned some Japanese, but that's all gone. If you don't
Okay.
practice, you lose it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I studied some Japanese in school, and I've been trying to brush up on it a little bit because I know enough to ask where the bathroom is and say please and thank you.
Yes, and then I
Refreshing.
love to interact with people whenever I am somewhere. I always love to interact, and the lovely Japanese people, they are not really into small talks. So it was really hard to maintain my limited Japanese
Yeah,
by being here. So
definitely. Well,
yeah.
and that was what I was curious about is, well, I remember when I was studying foreign languages in school, one of the teachers had said to really understand a culture is to understand jokes or humor. Like you really know that you can know when you understand the language well enough to know when it's a joke versus just something being said. So how is that translated in different languages? You mentioned something about joking at the beginning in different languages. You have to be really skilled in the languages, I would think, or at least understanding the culture in order to take your humor into a different language.
Yeah, I think for me, because I was in California at 18, I feel really comfortable in English. It's not that my English is perfect, but all the books I've read and all the writing was in English. So I feel I have a great passive vocabulary and I understand a lot. So I can make jokes, and I think when I was 18, they called me smartass, which is not maybe not nice, but that's because of my dry sense of humor, and
Yeah.
because I used wordplay, and so I did that then.
Yeah, I've been called that a lot in my life, and sometimes it's a term of endearment, and sometimes it's uh, people tired of my humor.
Yes, and for me, sometimes I make a joke and said, "Sorry, it's my foreign language, so I said the wrong word, and
Oh,
I
fair.
apologize."
That's always an easy out too.
Mm.
There may have just been a vocabulary thing. Yeah, that's awesome. So tell us, when you talk about your book Unthinkable, what's the concept of unthinkable? Is it about daring? Is it about, doing something that you would never do? You talked about getting your life in flow. What's the concept behind that idea?
So I spent like 7 years on that. So I will try to make a statement about that. So the um yeah, so unthinkable is about daring, but more daring to be your purest self, your authentic self. So that's very similar to owning your awkward, right? So in the old days, I tried difficult things. Like I studied in the French language. So I studied business in the French language at the school. That was very difficult. So that was challenging. Then I moved to Japan. I didn't speak any Japanese, and I worked there as a consultant. So that was challenging. I did Ironman triathlon, like a really long distance triathlon. I did
Yeah.
marathons and trail runs and all that. So I always try to prove that that I'm amazing, you
Uh-huh.
know. And but later in the last few years, I realized you don't have to do those crazy things, but it's more like disrupting your comfort zone. That's doing the unthinkable, and following your excitement and being and the most unthinkable thing you can do is being your authentic self,
Hmm.
and not having to do something to prove that you're okay, but to be yourself. And when I ask you, who are you, if you take away your family role, your titles, your hobbies, who are you if I take everything away? And that's your true authentic self. It's not connected to what you have, if you have a house or whatnot, a car. So it's really, who are you at the core, and that's the most unthinkable thing to do, to be your authentic self.
Yeah, and that just as you were describing that, having put in a lot of that same thought from a different angle myself, I know how scary that is for people to think about. Wait, if I take away those labels, that's how I define myself. That's who I am. Those are the boundaries and the protection I put up there. So that's a scary thing.
Yeah, I think for me, I was in a very safe box when I was in my marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was really focused on being a great dad, and I tried to be a great husband. And so sometimes even if you do your best, you try to do your best, you sometimes fail. So yeah, in the beginning I looked at it as a huge failure of mine, right?
Right.
And it was really scary to lose that identity,
Right.
because being married, and so being a married dad is an identity, and from one moment to the next it can be taken away. So then I had to, then at the same time I felt it was a great idea, and this is my sense of humor. It's the best moment to start your own business when you're in separation or divorce. It's really the best moment. And
Yeah.
I thought, when I'm going through all of that, I should also change my job, mix it up, and step outside of the safe and really amazing corporate job. So I did all of that, and that's really like death, right? My identity died, um, so
Yeah.
going through death, then there is rebirth, and that's really scary when you lose your. It's really hard to say what you do when you just start a business. It's really
Right.
hard. You start coaching, and you try to build up your speaking, but you are not actually getting so many clients. So it's really hard to tell other people what you're doing.
Right. Yeah. They like to
It's
ask, who's your
hard.
ideal client, or what are most of your clients like? And you're like, there aren't any.
Yeah, exactly. And still now it's challenging, because what I think what Unthinkable is about is being your most expansive, so your authentic self, and that's your most expansive self. And
Mm,
this, the people that are expansive, they're not in. It's not that the CEOs are the ones that are the most expansive, right? You can find someone who is really in the comfort zone and doesn't want to change anything. So yeah, it's really more about the essence. Who is ready? Who has the courage to expand? So
right.
yeah. So but what I wanted to say is what was really scary, and what is unthinkable, is losing like all, or shifting the identity from my old life, from the boxing life, to the life that I'm living now.
Yeah. I think I like that you relate it to death and dying, because I don't think we often plan for the grief that we need to encounter, that we're going to encounter with different changes in life, and that we do grieve the loss of the life we had when we go through changes, and we don't always understand that in the moment, that it's a grieving process. How was that for you? Like, we see people where they're at now when they make these changes, like, oh, I changed everything, I expanded myself, and I embraced my authentic, my awkward, and life is great. But we don't always see the hard part. And so, was it easy right away? Was it, crying yourself to sleep every night? Like, how was that process?
Um, so I don't know if you watch Marvel,
Mhm.
Spider-Man.
Yeah.
There are many different Spider-Mans, and in one cartoon, there were many Spider-Mans in different dimension.
Oh, yes.
And one of those dimension, he just went through divorce, and he says, I took it like a champion. And then you see him crying in the shower.
Uh-huh.
And I always tell my boys that whenever they leave, I take it like the champion, and I cry in the shower. So how I went through it, for me, the picture I can share is, I was trying, like everyone tries their best. So I was, in a Mini Cooper on the highway, and then from a side, like a heavy truck hits me right out from a blind corner. So
Hmm.
that's how I felt when it
Yeah.
happened. And then it felt like free falling. You fall back,
Right.
nothing to hold on. That's how it felt. And then when I stepped out of corporate, it was like jumping from a high tower. So it was a lot of falling. I felt ungrounded. I felt panicky. So it was really free fall. When you fall, and it's not like skydiving that you choose to fall, but you kind of try to hold on, but there is nothing that holds on. So doing the unthinkable always is about jumping without a safety net, right?
Right. Now,
and we always want to have a safety net, but many times there is no safety net. So you have to jump without knowing how you land. So that's kind of the emotions I went through. And then there is, then you deal with letting go of the old stories, and then you have anger, you have fear, you have scarcity, you have anger and more fear and more anger, and why. Why does it happen to me? And then you go through cycles of positive thinking, and you do all the work, all the inner work, and so it took me years.
Oh, definitely. So and it's so similar to this. So what I've gone through, so I can really relate as you're talking about this. And I'm curious, when you have gone through that and you're going through this free fall and you're falling, and I imagine there were times where you just had the urge to just shoot the spidey web back up to the top of the building and pull yourself back to, like, can I just get back to the life I had? But how does a person get through those moments where it's scary, or you have scarcity, or you want the safety net, or you want to climb back up to the life you had, and you can't?
I feel the life that I am living now, I'm living very with a lot of vulnerability. So I ride the waves every day. I don't feel fear or anger or this kind of heavy emotions that many times anymore. But it's like feeling scarcity and feeling that nothing works. That happens. It goes through cycle, and I like the waves, right? So riding the waves, and you have wipeouts, and what I do is grounding, because I'm a dreamer. I'm a lot of the time I'm in my mind, thinking, visualizing things, and then I just have to make sure that I actually that my feet actually touch the floor, right? And so when I felt like free falling, I was hugging trees, and I'm not joking. So I went to nature. I was sitting at the favorite spot here. I developed it. It became my favorite spot. Very close to my house, there is a gorge, and there is a river, a small stream. And I was sitting on a bench and put my feet into the ground, to ground, just to feel that I'm not falling anymore.
I love that.
And now it sounds not so serious, but I was really falling.
Yeah, I also
and that helped me.
Yeah, and with your dry sense of humor, I appreciate you calling out. I'm not joking here. I found I have to do
I always have to make a statement about that, because no one understands my humor. So I that's what I do with my kids.
Now, one thing, and it kind of relates, I think, to what you're talking about now, but early on you mentioned riding the wave and surrendering to this thing that's bigger than you, which is, looking back now, I think we can really see the metaphor, how it makes sense for what you've experienced the last few years and the changes you've made. But one thing you mentioned was giving in but not giving up. Can you explain the difference between those two ideas?
For me, I can explain it with the image of a duck dive. So in surfing, when a wave comes, you duck dive, right? So you dive with your board under the wave. And when you do it right, the wave pulls you out the other side. So it's very effortless. So that's surrender, right? Accepting it and become one with it and go to the other side.
Okay.
And giving up is just, stopping, getting out, and
not even trying.
And there is always a balance. Like sometimes when you have a tough wipeout, it's you see it in the big wave surfers. Sometimes they get so hurt, so they have to get out, and then just heal and then go back whenever they are healthy. And so yeah, so giving up is not always bad, but it's more giving in. I don't know how to explain it better.
Yeah. Well, I guess you might have to give up temporarily or take a break versus you're going to get back out there because I have to heal this injury so I can do it well. Doesn't mean I'm giving up forever.
Yeah, and I always say resilience is not about being the strongest or being tough, because when you look at surfboards, when the lip of the wave hits them, they break because they're hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
So actually, when you surrender, you become adaptable and soft.
Mm.
So when you have a wipeout, you actually your body becomes soft, and you just you hear from big wave surfers, they just need to be present, because when you panic, it uses a lot of air and a lot of energy. So you just have to protect your head and just be still, and then the ocean will bring you to the surface again. But if you fight, you will struggle. You will lose all the air, and the ocean, the waves will push you down.
Yeah, I when you said that about being resilient isn't about being like necessarily the strongest or toughest, it's that really resonates, because we always think about, oh, we've got to toughen up, we've got to harden ourselves, yet in order to get through we have to be pliable and we have to actually be able to move with things.
And they, in the Darwinism, so in they talk about the survival of the fittest, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the fittest means the one that fits best in. So that's the most adaptable one. So it's not survival of the fittest as the strongest, because otherwise the dinosaurs would have survived, right? So it's really about the one survives who doesn't fight the change, who doesn't fight the waves, who surrenders and goes with the flow and goes with the change. Because you can use all the energy you have to fight, to maintain a situation. So I could have used all my energy to fight for the marriage and try to make it work. But if it's just not a match, you can try effort as long as you want, but it just doesn't work. So I talk going from effort to energy, and going from effort to energy means to be in flow, not go upstream but go downstream with the current.
Right. And then you have more energy, because if you're going with the current, you have all that energy now you can use for other things.
Yes, you can ride the wave, and so that's really cool. That's riding the wave. So when a wave, like an opportunity is a wave, right? A wave can be perceived as a challenge or an opportunity, and it's you decide what it is for you. Something terrible can happen, and for me, I say, wow, now I live a different life. So it's opportunity, because I have this perspective now. But of course, at the time, it was a big wipeout, and I didn't have any air. So I think I learned. I was doing that my whole life, to see always the silver lining and to see like a positive perspective. Even while I was falling, I already saw the positive perspective, and that's why I cycled through that really fast. But my whole career was around change management, leading change. So my whole career was about self-development and leading change. So I was always dealing with this kind of field.
So did that make you feel more prepared to face changes for yourself, or did it make you feel like, oh man, I like to help work with this in corporations and with other people, not in my own life?
No, what I shared in continuous improvement is really my personal philosophy. And I think continuous improvement, if you break it down to the individual, it's self-development. And I had a different understanding before. I felt like I needed to be someone else. So for me, personal development was about becoming someone else. And I realized it's more becoming who you truly are. And I like to share the image of Da Vinci, who created the statue of David. That's a really famous statue. And the story goes that he found a stone that the other sculptures didn't want to use because it was without value, without worth. And he said he just took away everything that was not needed. And he created the perfectly balanced David statue, which is now in Firenze in Italy. And I think that's that's my perspective on personal development, is undoing all the conditioning, unschooling, and taking everything that doesn't belong away. So that's what I intend to do with my kids as well.
I love that. That's a beautiful analogy, and it really makes you think about, wait, how much have we packed onto ourselves that are weighing us down? And especially with that particular analogy, it's rock, it's stone, so it's heavy. And how much of that are we carrying around?
Yes, and I think if I have a lesson or a teaching for people, I would always say, let go as much as you can. Whatever you don't need anymore, whatever doesn't serve you, let it go, because it makes you so heavy. And it's things, it's people, and sometimes someone goes through a wipeout, and 25 years later they still talk about that wipeout.
Right.
And they are, everyone has challenges, everyone has wipeouts, but it's what we can influence is only how we react with it, how we go with it, how we go with the flow. And but we can decide to be victimized by this event and be a victim for the rest of our life. It's really that simple. It's a decision, and that's unthinkable is a decision in your mind. Do you want to be the victim, or you want to be a leader and want to be your authentic self? And I think that's the same. The same goes for owning your awkward, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good point that you make, that it's a decision. A lot of times we stew on, like, how am I? What kind of person am I? But we forget, wait, I have choices on how I want to be in the world and how I want to live my life and who I want to be in being myself. So Marcel, before we go, I'm going to ask you to ways that you would challenge our audience on how they could own their awkward. But before we do that, where's the best place for people to find you? We've got your links for your book and your website and everything down in the description of the show, but what's the best way for people to connect with you, to follow you, to support you?
I use Instagram and LinkedIn mainly, where I share some posts about what I'm thinking about unthinkable and my learnings. And of course on Amazon, if you want to know more about my book, check out my book on Amazon. It's called Unthinkable: Life Teachings from a Soul Surfer. And we would love to hear your thoughts and if you get any insights out of it.
I love it. There's and everybody be sure you check it out. It's a Marcel's, as you can see from listening today, he's full of insights. It's a great journey. Just the fact that you're in Switzerland and you're a surfer, that's got to get people's attention right there, right?
Yeah.
So how would you challenge people to own their awkward, to do their unthinkable in the next couple of weeks coming up?
So I always like to do 21-day challenges, because that's kind of the sweet spot for me. I like to shift and move and change. And I find 21 days is amazing period to make a big shift in your rituals, in your habits. So I would challenge you to do something that is outside of your comfort zone for the next 21 days. And you will see that if you do something that is scary, outside of your comfort zone, that expands you will get so much out of it for the whole life, not only in this area. And I would advise you to do something that excites you. So for me, I was just in Morocco, and I learned how to wing foil, which is you're riding on a board that has a foil, so it lifts out of the water, right? And
Wow.
and you hold a wing. And I have been surfing for a long time. Although I live in Switzerland, so it's mainly when I'm traveling. And it was a totally new skill, but it's so exciting to be a total beginner. So for me, that's the example that what I learned recently, that was totally unthinkable. I was total beginner. I had no clue. I thought this is impossible for me. This is impossible. So if you can learn something like that, do something like that absolutely excites you, that you wake up and like my kids, they have the sparkling eyes, and you wake up and you want to go for it. That's the skill I challenge you to learn. The skill, and for me, unthinkable is personal, awkward is personal. So find the unthinkable for you, right? So challenge yourself with something that absolutely excites you and changes the trajectory of the rest of your life.
I love that. And I love the idea that you remind us that when you do these things, it's a change for the rest of your life. It's not just, oh, that was a great day, that was a fun event. Yes, that's true, but now you're on the path to other great things happening or doing that thing again. And it just changes it for every day. Every experience we have, we're different from now till the rest of our lives. We're forever changed.
Yeah, and I learned about neuroscience, that the pathway you create by doing something new, you create, like it's like when you walk through grass the first time, there is no you don't see the footprints, right? But when you walk and walk and walk, after 21 days, you see there is a little path or a little trail. So that's what happens in your brain. So you make connections, and on the second day I didn't know how to do that. On the third day I still didn't know, and suddenly on day 7, 8, I just could do it. It's just amazing.
Wow. Yeah, you didn't have to start over as a beginner every day once you've done it a few times.
Yeah, and be patient, right? So be patient. So when you do it daily, be patient, and sometimes I always say that when you feel like nothing is happening, everything is happening. When you feel like you don't advance, suddenly, boom, there is your progress, because in nature and in humans, nothing is linear. It's only our linear mind, our reptile brain tries to keep things linear. It's safe. But it doesn't
feels better when it's linear. It feels more explainable.
It feels safe. And, I think the really living the unthinkable is really be outside of the safe space and, being more expansive.
I love it. There's so much here we could unpack. We could go down so many different linear and non-linear lines, exploring all this. Marcel, it's been such a pleasure having you on today.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you. And everybody out there, be sure that you follow Marcel, get his book, try something new for the next 21 days. Challenge yourself, do the challenge, because you're going to feel the reward. It might be tricky the first few times, but like he said, day 7 or 8, all of a sudden you're going to feel like you start to know what you're doing. It's going to be awesome.
Thank you so much.
And everybody, be sure you go out there this week and own your awkward. Thank you so much for listening in for today's show. Be sure to visit awkwardcareer.com to continue your journey. And of course, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends so they can find their awkward side and learn how to own it.